The detection came through at 3:47 a.m. Universal Time on what would later be called Day Zero. Deep space monitoring stations in Chile, Australia, and Hawaii registered an object moving through the outer solar system at velocities that defied conventional explanation. Not faster than light, but fast enough to suggest artificial propulsion rather than natural orbital mechanics. Initial readings from the Atacama Large Millimeter Array showed something unprecedented. The object emitted no heat signature typical of asteroids or comets. Instead, sensors detected exotic energy patterns that shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. Gravitational anomalies surrounded the object like a bubble, distorting space-time in ways our instruments could barely measure. Within 6 hours, every major space agency had trained their most sensitive equipment on the visitor. The object was roughly cylindrical, 2 kilometers long, and composed of materials that reflected no radar signals. It moved with purpose, decelerating as it approached the inner solar system using no visible propulsion system. Dr. Sarah Chen at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory was first to notice the trajectory's endpoint. The object wasn't heading for Earth directly. Instead, it was moving toward Lagrange point L1, the gravitationally stable position between Earth and the Sun, where the gravitational forces of both bodies perfectly balance. This location, 1.5 million kilometers from Earth, would give it an unobstructed view of our planet, while remaining beyond the reach of any Earth-based weapons. The deceleration continued for 18 hours. Global leaders were briefed as the object settled into position at L1 with mechanical precision. No natural object could achieve such perfect orbital insertion without course corrections. This was technology, not cosmic debris. Communication attempts began immediately. Radio signals on every frequency, mathematical sequences, prime numbers, even music. The object remained silent for 12 hours, absorbing our transmissions without response. Space agencies scrambled to position satellites for better observation. The International Space Station adjusted its cameras. The James Webb Space Telescope interrupted its deep space observations to focus on our unexpected visitor. At 10:15 p.m. Universal Time, the silence ended. The object began transmitting on multiple frequencies simultaneously. The signal was structured, clearly artificial, and powerful enough to be picked up by amateur radio operators worldwide. Within minutes, communication systems across Earth were receiving the same message in perfect synchronization. The transmission contained mathematical proofs, physical constants, and something else. Embedded in the data stream were blueprints for a device that theoretical physicists recognized with growing horror. The equations described a mechanism for triggering false vacuum decay, a theoretical doomsday scenario that had existed only in academic papers and science fiction until this moment. As translation programs worked to decode the full message, one thing became clear. This wasn't a greeting or an invitation to dialogue. The final portion of the transmission was unmistakably an ultimatum, complete with a countdown timer that had already begun. Earth had exactly 72 hours. The world's most powerful governments attempted to suppress the information, but the signal's broad transmission made secrecy impossible. Within 3 hours, social media platforms were flooding with speculation, panic, and disbelief. The visitor had announced itself not to governments or scientists, but to everyone with a receiver. Day Zero ended with humanity united in a single, terrifying realization. We were no longer alone in the universe, and our first contact with alien intelligence had begun with what appeared to be a death sentence for our entire world. To understand the weapon pointed at Earth, we must first understand the nature of empty space itself. What we call vacuum isn't truly empty. Even in the void between galaxies, quantum fields fluctuate with energy. Particles appear and disappear, and the fabric of space-time itself vibrates with quantum uncertainty. Our universe exists in what physicists call a metastable state. Imagine a ball resting in a valley on a mountainside. The ball seems stable, but it's not at the lowest possible point. A sufficient push could send it tumbling to a deeper valley below. Our universe's vacuum state might be that ball, and the void bomb could be the push. The concept emerged from quantum field theory in the 1970s. Physicists Sidney Coleman and Frank DeLucia calculated that if our vacuum is metastable, a bubble of true vacuum could theoretically form. Inside this bubble, the laws of physics would be fundamentally different. Matter as we know it couldn't exist. Atoms would unravel, particles would cease to function, and the very concept of chemistry would become meaningless. This bubble would expand at nearly the speed of light, converting false vacuum to true vacuum as it grows. The boundary between the two states would be a wall of destruction moving at approximately 299,792 kilometers per second. Nothing could outrun it. No shield could stop it. The transformation would be absolute and irreversible. The energy release at the boundary would exceed any explosion in the universe's history. Not because of heat or radiation, but because the fundamental constants that allow matter to exist would shift. Protons would decay instantly. Electrons would cease orbiting nuclei. The strong nuclear force that binds quarks together would operate under different rules, if at all. Natural vacuum decay might occur spontaneously somewhere in the universe. Calculations suggest the probability is extraordinarily low, perhaps one chance in 10 to the 100 years. But the alien device changes this equation. Their technology apparently can trigger this transition artificially, creating a localized bubble of true vacuum that would consume everything it touches. The mathematics are elegant in their simplicity and terrifying in their implications. The Higgs field, which gives particles their mass, would shift to a lower energy state. This cascade would rewrite the fundamental rules that govern reality. Inside the bubble, new physics would reign, incompatible with any form of matter that evolved in our false vacuum universe. Earth's physicists had theorized about this possibility for decades without truly believing it could be weaponized. The energy requirements seemed impossible. Creating the precise conditions to trigger vacuum decay would require manipulating quantum fields at scales we couldn't imagine achieving. Yet the alien specifications showed exactly how it could be done. The device at L1 contained exotic matter configurations that our science had only glimpsed in particle accelerator experiments, negative energy densities, controlled quantum tunneling, manipulation of the Higgs field itself. Each component was theoretically possible, but practically impossible with human technology. Together, they formed a trigger for the ultimate doomsday weapon. What made the weapon truly horrifying was its comprehensiveness. Nuclear weapons leave radiation and ruins. Antimatter annihilation produces gamma rays and particles, but vacuum decay leaves nothing, not even empty space as we understand it. The region consumed would exist under fundamentally different physical laws, as alien to our universe as our universe would be to a two-dimensional flatland. The visiting aliens had mastered the fundamental forces of nature to a degree that made them gods by any practical measure, and they had chosen to demonstrate this mastery by threatening Earth with the most complete form of annihilation physics allows. The full translation took 14 hours to complete. Every major university's linguistics and cryptography departments worked in parallel, cross-checking their results. The message was designed to be understood, written in mathematical languages that any technological civilization would recognize. But its content was unlike anything humanity had prepared for in its first contact scenarios. The aliens identified themselves as the erosion protocol, though this was clearly a translation approximation. They described themselves not as a species, but as a function, a role within something larger. Their purpose was maintenance of what they termed causal stability across the local galactic region. According to their message, Earth had been under observation for 12,000 years. Our development from hunter-gatherers to a spacefaring civilization had been catalogued and analyzed. The recent acceleration of our technological progress had triggered specific concerns, not our nuclear weapons or climate change, but something more fundamental about our scientific research trajectory. The violation that warranted our termination was surprisingly specific. 3 years ago, experiments at the Large Hadron Collider had produced results that the aliens claimed could eventually lead to uncontrolled vacuum decay. Not immediately, not even within human lifetimes, but eventually. The probability was calculated at 0.003% over the next million years. To the erosion protocol, this was unacceptable. They explained their perspective with cold logic. The galaxy contained 400 billion stars, potentially millions of civilizations. One civilization's reckless experiments could destroy them all if vacuum decay began and propagated outward at light speed. Earth was a cancer cell that needed to be removed before it metastasized. The message contained detailed proofs of their claims, particle physics data we hadn't yet discovered, predictions about experiments we were planning, mathematical frameworks that unified quantum mechanics and general relativity in ways our scientists had sought for decades. They weren't lying or bluffing. Their understanding of physics surpassed ours by millennia. They offered no negotiation, no terms for surrender, no opportunity for Earth to change course. The decision had been made by entities that viewed our entire civilization as we might view bacteria in a petri dish, necessary to eliminate before contamination spread. The 72-hour countdown wasn't cruelty, they explained, but their protocol's requirement for informed consent of termination. Every sapient species had the right to understand why they were being eliminated. It was, in their framework, a form of respect for consciousness, even as they prepared to annihilate it. Embedded in the message were recordings of 17 other civilizations that had been similarly terminated. Each had violated stability protocols in different ways. Some had experimented with artificial black holes, others with exotic matter, still others with dimensional manipulation. All had been judged too dangerous to continue existing. The final portion of the message was perhaps the most disturbing. The erosion protocol expressed what could only be interpreted as regret, not for our impending destruction, but for the loss of our potential contributions to galactic culture. They included instructions for uploading human knowledge to their archives, a form of limited immortality for our species' achievements, if not our actual survival. They would record everything about Earth before its destruction. Our history, art, science, and DNA patterns would be preserved in their vast databases. Future civilizations could study us, learn from our mistakes, understand what not to do. We would become a cautionary tale told across the galaxy. The message ended with precise timing for the void bomb's activation. Countdown timers appeared on every screen receiving the transmission, synchronized to the nanosecond. Humanity had 61 hours and 14 minutes remaining. The void bomb's specifications filled thousands of pages when fully decoded. Earth's physicists worked frantically to understand the device hanging 1.5 million kilometers away. What they found challenged every assumption about the limits of technology and the manipulation of fundamental forces. The weapon consisted of 3 primary components. First, an exotic matter core that created regions of negative energy density. This alone was beyond human comprehension, requiring materials that could only exist under conditions found in the first microseconds after the Big Bang. The aliens had somehow stabilized these materials, containing them in fields that prevented immediate decay. Second, a quantum field manipulator that could alter the local value of the Higgs field. This component worked by creating resonances in space-time itself, using gravitational waves as carrier signals for quantum information. The precision required was equivalent to measuring the width of a proton from a distance of several light years. The third component was the trigger mechanism, a cascade initiator that would create the initial bubble of true vacuum. This required temperatures below absolute zero, achieved through quantum mechanical tricks that violated thermodynamics as we understood it. The aliens had created a region where entropy ran backward, where cause and effect could be temporarily reversed. Together, these components could create a sphere approximately 1 meter in diameter, where the laws of physics would fundamentally change. Inside this sphere, our universe's false vacuum would collapse to true vacuum. The sphere would then expand at 99.97% the speed of light, converting everything it touched. The expansion rate was limited only by relativity itself. No information could travel faster than light, and the vacuum decay boundary was a form of information, rewriting the quantum fields that define reality. Earth would be consumed in 0.04 seconds. The Moon would follow 1.3 seconds later. Mars, depending on its orbital position, would last between 4 and 24 minutes. What made the weapon truly elegant was its irreversibility. Once triggered, no force in the universe could stop the expansion. The aliens themselves couldn't halt the process if they changed their minds. The bubble would grow until it encountered another region of true vacuum, or until the universe itself ended, whichever came first. Energy requirements for the weapon exceeded Earth's total power output by a factor of 10 million. The aliens were channeling energy directly from subspace, tapping into quantum fluctuations at scales we could barely detect. Their power source was the vacuum itself, using the universe's fundamental instability as both battery and ammunition. The device included safeguards to prevent premature detonation, quantum encryption protocols that would take Earth's best supercomputers longer than the age of the universe to crack. Any attempt to approach or interfere with the device would trigger immediate activation. We couldn't stop it, couldn't delay it, couldn't even properly observe it without risk. Most disturbing was the realization that this weapon was routine for the erosion protocol. The engineering was standardized, mass-produced. They had deployed similar devices thousands of times across the galaxy. For them, erasing a world was as mundane as humans might consider disposing of hazardous waste. Our nuclear weapons, which we had considered the ultimate expression of destructive power, were firecrackers compared to this. Even antimatter bombs, still theoretical for human technology, would be infinitely less complete in their annihilation. Those weapons destroyed, this weapon uncreated. Earth's scientists could only observe and document. Every model, every simulation, every desperate calculation led to the same conclusion. The weapon would work exactly as specified. In 58 hours, the fundamental nature of space itself would turn against us, and there was absolutely nothing we could do to prevent it. 24 hours after the first transmission, humanity received its first visual confirmation of our executioners. Telescopes detected movement near the void bomb. 3 vessels, each approximately 500 meters long, materialized from what appeared to be empty space. They had been there all along, hidden behind technology that bent light around them. The ships defied conventional design logic. No visible propulsion systems, no obvious weapons, no windows or sensor arrays. They appeared to be grown rather than built, with surfaces that flowed like liquid while maintaining solid form. Spectroscopic analysis revealed materials that shouldn't exist, alloys of elements that weren't on our periodic table. The vessels moved without acceleration, simply existing at one point, then another, ignoring inertia entirely. They positioned themselves in an equilateral triangle around the void bomb, each exactly 10,000 kilometers from the device. The formation created a defensive perimeter that no Earth weapon could hope to penetrate. Then came the first direct communication since the ultimatum, not a broadcast this time, but targeted transmissions to specific individuals. World leaders, scientists, philosophers, and seemingly random citizens received personalized messages in their native languages. The aliens had been studying us so thoroughly, they knew our individual communication preferences. They revealed more about themselves, though their biology remained hidden. The erosion protocol wasn't a single species, but a collective of intelligences that had transcended physical form millions of years ago. They existed primarily as information patterns, quantum consciousness distributed across vast networks. The ships were merely interfaces, ways to interact with the physical universe when necessary. Their history stretched back 4.7 billion years, older than our solar system. They had witnessed the birth and death of countless civilizations, the rise and fall of galactic empires. They spoke of wars fought with weapons that could destroy entire star systems, of peace treaties written in the quantum foam itself, of technologies that had transformed matter into pure thought. Earth's emergence as a technological species had been predicted in their models thousands of years before we discovered fire. Our development followed patterns they had seen countless times. The discovery of atomic energy, the digital revolution, the early steps into space, all predictable stages in a civilization's growth toward dangerous knowledge. They explained why Earth specifically posed such a threat. Our combination of rapid technological advancement and limited understanding of consequences made us uniquely dangerous. We were approaching discoveries that could destabilize local spacetime without comprehending the galactic implications. Our curiosity exceeded our wisdom by a fatal margin. The visualization they provided showed Earth's potential futures had we been allowed to continue. In 90% of scenarios, we destroyed ourselves within 3 centuries. But in 4% of cases, we achieved technologies that could accidentally trigger cascading vacuum collapse. Those odds were unacceptable when weighed against galactic survival. They shared images of other worlds they had terminated. Beautiful civilizations with architectures beyond imagination, species that had achieved perfect harmony with their environments, cultures that had created art forms humans couldn't perceive. All had been judged too dangerous to continue. All had been erased with the same clinical precision Earth now faced. The aliens expressed something resembling empathy, but filtered through intelligence so vast it became almost meaningless. They understood our fear, our anger, our desperate desire to survive. They had observed these responses 17,000 times before. But understanding didn't translate to mercy. The protocol was absolute. As our remaining hours dwindled to 47, the aliens made one final gesture. They opened their archives to humanity, allowing us to upload anything we wanted preserved. Our entire internet, our genetic codes, our personal messages to the future. It would all be stored in quantum crystalline matrices that would outlast the stars themselves. The 48-hour mark triggered humanity's transition from disbelief to action. Global emergency protocols activated as governments worldwide acknowledged what they had desperately hoped was an elaborate hoax. The President of the United States addressed the nation from a bunker beneath Mount Weather. Similar speeches echoed from Beijing, Moscow, London, and New Delhi. The decision to inform the public had been debated intensely. Some argued for maintaining secrecy to prevent panic. Others insisted people deserved to know their fate. In the end, the choice was made for them. The alien transmission had been too widespread, the evidence too overwhelming. Amateur astronomers could see the void bomb through telescopes. The countdown timers appeared on every connected device. Public reaction varied dramatically across cultures and communities. In Tokyo, residents continued their daily routines with stoic acceptance. The concept of shikata ganai, it cannot be helped, providing cultural framework for facing the inevitable. In New York, spontaneous gatherings filled Times Square as people sought connection in their final hours. Religious institutions experienced unprecedented attendance. Churches, mosques, synagogues, and temples overflowed with those seeking meaning or comfort. The Vatican issued a statement declaring that God's love transcended physical existence, that souls would endure even if matter could not. Other faiths offered similar assurances, though none could explain why an omnipotent deity would permit such complete annihilation. Scientists worked frantically on impossible solutions. The Large Hadron Collider attempted to create their own vacuum bubble as a shield, despite calculations showing it would simply accelerate Earth's destruction. Nuclear weapons were ready to launch at the void bomb, though everyone knew conventional explosives couldn't affect a device operating on quantum principles. The economic system collapsed within hours. Stock markets ceased trading. Banks closed their doors. Currency became meaningless when no future existed to spend it in. Yet somehow, essential services continued. Power plant workers stayed at their posts. Hospital staff treated patients, not from hope of survival, but from simple human duty. Elon Musk announced SpaceX would launch every available rocket, carrying anyone who could reach the launch sites. The journeys would be one-way, supplies limited, survival unlikely. But dying in space weeks from now seemed preferable to vanishing in the void bubble. Within hours, Boca Chica and Cape Canaveral were surrounded by millions of desperate people. Governments attempted to maintain order through martial law, but enforcement proved impossible when police and soldiers faced the same doom as everyone else. Some cities descended into chaos. Others achieved unexpected peace, as people realized violence was pointless when existence itself would soon end. The internet became humanity's confessional. Social media platforms removed all content restrictions, allowing people to share their deepest truths. Love letters to crushes never confessed. Apologies for wrongs never acknowledged. Creative works released incomplete. Secrets that had shaped entire lives spilled into the digital void. Children asked questions adults couldn't answer. Parents struggled to explain why they had brought life into a world about to end. Teachers abandoned lesson plans to simply talk with their students about fear, love, and what it meant to be human. The youngest generation would never grow up, never fall in love, never have children of their own. As the 48-hour mark passed, humanity began to accept what it could not change. The void bomb hung in space, patient and inexorable. The alien ships maintained their vigil, and Earth turned on its axis one more time, carrying 6 billion people toward an appointment with the physics of annihilation. Could anyone survive vacuum decay? Earth's physicists ran endless simulations, each reaching the same terrible conclusion. The void bubble would expand at 299,792 kilometers per second, converting false vacuum to true vacuum with perfect efficiency. No bunker could protect against physics itself being rewritten. No shield could deflect a transformation of spacetime's fundamental nature. The Mars colonies faced a bitter irony. Depending on orbital positions, they would survive between 4 and 24 minutes longer than Earth. Long enough to watch their homeworld vanish, to comprehend their own approaching doom, but not long enough to matter. The colonists debated whether to observe Earth's final moments or spend their extra time in chosen ignorance. The moon bases would have 1.3 seconds after Earth disappeared. Not enough time for conscious thought, barely enough for light to carry the image of Earth's destruction to human eyes. They would see the planet begin to vanish before they too were consumed. A mercy, perhaps, compared to Mars's agonizing weight. Spacecraft already in transit faced different calculations. The asteroid mining vessel Persistence was 3 months from Ceres when the announcement came. They had supplies for 6 months, enough to witness the void bubble consume the inner solar system. Their crew of 12 voted unanimously to continue their mission, to die as explorers rather than return for annihilation. The Generation ship proposal emerged from desperation rather than hope. If humanity could launch vessels at significant fractions of light speed, some might outrun the bubble temporarily. But temporarily was the key word. Even at 90% light speed, the void bubble would eventually catch any ship launched from Earth. The mathematics were inescapable, unless the bubble stopped expanding. Some theorists proposed it might reach a maximum size, that quantum effects could slow or halt its growth. But this was wishful thinking without foundation. Every model showed indefinite expansion at light speed. The entire galaxy would be consumed in 100,000 years. The local group in millions. Eventually, only the accelerating expansion of the universe itself might spare distant galaxies. Underground shelters received frantic attention despite their futility. The deepest mines reached 4 kilometers below the surface. At light speed, the void bubble would penetrate that depth in 0.000013 seconds. The most reinforced bunker would provide less protection than tissue paper against this transformation of reality itself. Cryogenic preservation offered no escape. Frozen bodies were still made of atoms, still dependent on the false vacuum's physical laws. When those laws changed, the atoms would cease to exist in any recognizable form. No technology could preserve matter through such fundamental phase transition. Some proposed uploading human consciousness to computers, achieving digital immortality before physical destruction. But computers required matter to exist. Silicon and metal and electromagnetic fields. All would be unmade by vacuum decay. Even quantum computers operating at the smallest possible scales would vanish when those scales themselves transformed. The space elevators under construction in Ecuador and Kenya became focal points for desperate escape attempts. If completed, they could launch pods continuously, achieving orbit without rockets. But completion would take years Earth didn't have. The partially built structures stood as monuments to interrupted ambition. Wormhole research at Princeton achieved breakthrough after breakthrough, compressed into days what should have taken decades. But creating traversable wormholes required exotic matter the aliens possessed, but humans couldn't synthesize. Even if successful, where would the wormholes lead? Another part of the galaxy that would eventually face the same expanding void. The only honest survival strategy was acceptance. Earth's biosphere, 4 billion years of evolution, would end completely. Humanity's brief moment of consciousness would terminate, but the universe would continue, changed, but not ended. New physics would reign where Earth once orbited. Perhaps, in billions of years, new forms of existence might arise in the true vacuum, as alien to us as we were to the quantum foam. The military response began within hours of confirmation, though everyone involved understood its futility. The combined nuclear arsenals of Earth's 9 nuclear powers could generate roughly 15,000 megatons of explosive force. Against a device operating through quantum field manipulation, this was meaningless. But governments needed to act, if only to maintain the illusion of resistance. Operation Longshot launched from Vandenberg Air Force Base 36 hours before detonation. 3 Minuteman III missiles, modified with deep space guidance packages, accelerated toward L1 at maximum thrust. They would reach the void bomb in 18 hours, carrying humanity's most powerful thermonuclear warheads. The explosion would be visible from Earth, a brief star flowering in the daytime sky before accomplishing nothing. The direct energy weapons proved equally ineffective. The USS Gerald R. Ford positioned itself in the Pacific, angling its experimental laser arrays toward the target. 30 megawatts of coherent light struck the void bomb for sustained bursts. Spectroscopic analysis showed no thermal change, no ablation, no response whatsoever. The device absorbed the energy without acknowledgement. Kinetic bombardment offered theoretical promise. Project Thor, the orbital tungsten rod system, could deliver impacts at Mach 10, but the void bomb's defensive perimeter extended beyond physical barriers. Objects approaching within 1,000 kilometers simply ceased acceleration, caught in spatial distortions that prevented further approach. The aliens had considered every conventional attack vector. Electronic warfare specialists attempted cyber infiltration, hoping the device contained programmable components. But the void bomb operated on principles beyond binary code or quantum computing. Its control systems existed in dimensions human mathematics could barely describe. The hacking attempts were like throwing stones at a rainbow. SETI reversed its purpose, transmitting pleas for mercy on every frequency the aliens had used. Messages from world leaders, children's choirs, appeals to whatever empathy the erosion protocol might possess. The transmissions went unanswered. The decision had been made by intelligences operating on timescales where human civilization was barely a flicker. The Large Hadron Collider attempted to generate microscopic black holes, hoping gravitational anomalies might disrupt the void bomb's operation. After pushing the accelerator beyond every safety limit, they succeeded in creating quantum-scale gravitational distortions that lasted nanoseconds before evaporating. The effort consumed Switzerland's entire power grid and achieved nothing. Chemical and biological weapons were proposed and dismissed. How could toxins affect a device with no biological components? How could acids corrode materials that existed partially outside normal space-time? Earth's arsenal had been designed to kill living things, not challenge the fundamental forces of reality. Project Sundial emerged from classified Pentagon files, a doomsday weapon designed during the Cold War but never built. It would crack Earth's crust, releasing the planet's molten core in a directed stream. Theoretically, this could push Earth itself out of its orbit, moving the planet away from the expanding void bubble. Calculations showed it would gain perhaps 3 additional seconds of existence. Negotiation teams worked through the countdown, transmitting increasingly desperate offers. Earth would cease all particle physics research. We would abandon space travel, accept any restrictions, any monitoring, any limitations on our development. The silence from L1 remained absolute. The erosion protocol didn't negotiate with extinction candidates. Some proposed triggering our own vacuum decay first, denying the aliens their controlled termination. If Earth had to die, at least we could choose the terms. But creating the precise conditions required exotic matter we didn't possess and knowledge we hadn't achieved. We couldn't even commit civilizational suicide properly. 24 hours before activation, Earth's combined military forces stood down. The nuclear missiles would impact hours after the void bomb triggered, striking nothing but expanding vacuum. The lasers powered down to conserve energy for civilian needs. Soldiers returned home to spend final hours with family. The war against physics had been lost before it began. Beneath Cheyenne Mountain, engineers worked with desperate precision on humanity's last scientific gamble. The theory was elegant in its simplicity. Create an inverse field that might maintain a pocket of false vacuum within the expanding true vacuum bubble. A lifeboat of preserved physics in an ocean of transformed space-time. Dr. Angela Rodriguez led the effort, commanding resources from every national laboratory. Fermilab's superconducting magnets were airlifted to Colorado. CERN shipped exotic matter samples preserved from decade-old experiments. The National Ignition Facility provided laser compression systems, all converging on a chamber 2 kilometers below ground where humanity would make its stand against annihilation. The concept required generating negative energy densities around a small volume, essentially creating a bubble of warped spacetime that would resist the vacuum decay wave. Inside this bubble, the laws of physics would remain unchanged. Matter could continue existing. A handful of humans might survive while the rest of Earth transformed into something unrecognizable. Power requirements exceeded global generation capacity. Every nuclear reactor in North America was networked together, their output channeled through superconducting cables that had to be cooled with liquid helium. The magnetic fields generated were so powerful that metal objects were pulled from workers' hands at distances of 50 meters. 3 technicians died when pacemakers failed in the electromagnetic storm. The test runs produced promising results. For microseconds, they successfully created regions where space-time itself seemed to resist change. Quantum measurements showed the fabric of reality becoming rigid, locked into its current state. But maintaining the field for longer than nanoseconds caused cascade failures. The equipment literally tore itself apart as conflicting forces exceeded material tolerances. Construction proceeded on the survival chamber itself, a sphere 30 meters in diameter, wrapped in layers of exotic metamaterials that shouldn't exist according to conventional physics. Inside, life support for 50 people who would represent humanity's continuation. Selection committees worked through impossible choices. Who deserved to survive when billions would perish? The mathematics suggested a 15% chance of success, odds that would normally terminate any scientific project. But 15% was infinitely better than 0. If the field held for even minutes after the void bomb triggered, it would prove false vacuum could be preserved. That knowledge alone might be worth the attempt. International cooperation reached unprecedented levels. Russian scientists shared classified research from Soviet-era exotic matter experiments. Chinese teams provided quantum field manipulation techniques developed in secret facilities. Information that nations had killed to protect was freely exchanged in humanity's final collaborative effort. The chamber's interior was Spartan but functional. Hydroponic gardens, water recycling systems, a small nuclear reactor for power. If successful, the 50 inhabitants would exist in the only bubble of familiar physics in a transformed universe. They would be alone in ways no human had ever experienced, surrounded by space-time that operated on alien principles. Psychological screening for candidates proved nearly impossible. How could anyone evaluate mental fitness for such existence? The selected individuals would watch Earth disappear around them, would know they were the only survivors of their entire species. The chamber included extensive psychiatric medications and a small chapel for whatever comfort faith might provide. Testing accelerated as the countdown approached single digits. They achieved stable fields lasting entire seconds. The energy requirements dropped as efficiency improved. But time was the enemy. Full implementation needed weeks of careful calibration. They had hours, and those were disappearing rapidly. 18 hours before detonation, the decision was made. The chamber would be sealed with whoever was inside when the void bomb triggered. 43 of the 50 positions were filled. The others had either fled or couldn't reach Colorado in time. Rodriguez would operate the controls from outside, sacrificing herself to give others their slim chance at continuation. The erosion protocol's history, shared in fragments through targeted transmissions, revealed a civilization so advanced that calling them merely alien seemed inadequate. They had transcended biology 4 billion years ago, uploading consciousness into quantum crystalline matrices that could survive the death of stars. Originally, they were aquatic creatures from a world orbiting a red dwarf star in what humans call the Sagittarius arm. Their evolution from simple multicellular organisms to spacefaring intelligence took 600 million years, far longer than humanity's rapid ascent. This gradual development gave them patience and perspective humans lacked. Their first encounter with vacuum decay was accidental. A research station experimenting with exotic matter triggered a localized collapse that consumed their moon. Only the moon's distance from their homeworld prevented total annihilation. The experience traumatized their entire species, leading to centuries of scientific prohibition. But eventually, understanding replaced fear. They discovered 17 other civilizations had been destroyed by vacuum decay events, some natural, others triggered by careless experimentation. The galaxy was littered with spheres of true vacuum, regions where matter couldn't exist, where the physics that enabled life had been fundamentally altered. These dead zones were expanding at light speed, slowly consuming the galaxy. The decision to become the erosion protocol wasn't made lightly. They spent millions of years debating the ethics of preventive genocide. How many civilizations could be sacrificed to save the galaxy? What gave them the right to judge? But mathematics provided cold clarity. Without intervention, intelligent life would be extinct within 100 million years. They established 3 criteria for termination. First, a civilization must possess technology capable of triggering vacuum decay, intentionally or accidentally. Second, that civilization must show indicators of using such technology within a millennium. Third, diplomatic intervention must have failed or been deemed impossible due to the species' nature. Earth met all 3 criteria. Our particle accelerators were approaching energies that could destabilize local vacuum states. Our scientific curiosity exceeded our caution, a trait they had observed in 78% of terminated civilizations. And our fragmented governance made coordinated restraint impossible. We couldn't stop ourselves from eventually triggering catastrophe. The erosion protocol maintained careful records of every termination. They preserved genetic material, cultural artifacts, and complete historical records. In their vast archives, 17,000 civilizations existed as data, their achievements and failures studied by species that would never make the same mistakes. They showed us images of the Kythera, insectoid beings who had achieved perfect ecological balance before discovering quantum manipulation. The ordained, a hive mind that spanned 12-star systems before their experiments in dimensional physics warranted termination. The singers, who had encoded their entire culture in gravitational waves before their research into false vacuum states sealed their fate. Each civilization had pleaded for mercy. Each had promised to abandon dangerous research. Some had even attempted to destroy their own technology to prove commitment to safety. But the erosion protocol had learned through bitter experience that promises made under threat of extinction were rarely kept. Fear faded, curiosity returned, research resumed. The void bomb wasn't their only tool, merely the most appropriate for Earth's threat level. They possessed weapons that could cause stars to go nova, that could unravel DNA across light years, that could trap entire worlds in temporal loops. The void bomb was precise, quick, and comprehensive. By their standards, it was merciful. They operated on timescales humans couldn't comprehend. To them, Earth's entire history, from agriculture to spaceflight, was barely a moment. Our crisis felt eternal to us, but registered as routine to beings who had performed this duty for eons. They would remember us, but only as entry 17,439 in their catalogue of necessary extinctions. Society's collapse accelerated as the final day began. Emergency services abandoned their posts in cascading failures. Police officers went home to families. Firefighters left stations unmanned. The thin veneer of civilization that separated order from chaos dissolved in hours, though what emerged wasn't always darkness. In Manhattan, spontaneous block parties erupted as neighbors who had never spoken shared final meals. Restaurants opened their doors, chefs preparing elaborate farewell feasts from remaining supplies. Wine cellars were emptied. Vintage bottles worth thousands consumed like water. Money had no meaning when tomorrow would never come. Hospitals faced impossible decisions. Surgeries were cancelled. Chronic treatments abandoned. Why save a life that would end in hours? But maternity wards remained fully staffed. Nurses and doctors helped deliver babies who would live less than a day, because bringing life into the world still mattered, even at the world's end. The Vatican held its final Mass, broadcast to 2 billion Catholics worldwide. Pope Francis spoke of resurrection, of consciousness beyond physical form, of God's plan transcending human understanding. But his voice broke when blessing the children gathered in St. Peter's Square. Faith provided comfort, but couldn't change physics. Suicide rates spiked globally, but not as dramatically as psychologists had predicted. Most people chose to face the end consciously, surrounded by loved ones rather than alone in self-imposed darkness. The void bomb would provide a death instantaneous and painless. Why rush toward individual oblivion when collective erasure approached? Confessions flooded social media as people revealed secrets they'd carried for years. Affairs admitted, crimes confessed, love declared. The hashtag number sign before the void trended worldwide as humanity engaged in collective catharsis. Some messages were beautiful, others heartbreaking. All were ultimately pointless, yet somehow essential. Children processed the approaching end through play, creating games about racing the void bubble, drawing pictures of families holding hands as they disappeared. Child psychologists had crafted explanations about becoming stardust, about consciousness merging with the universe, comforting lies that were kinder than incomprehensible truth. The president addressed the nation one final time from the White House lawn, having abandoned the bunker to die under open sky. She spoke of humanity's achievements, our journey from caves to stars, the beauty we had created and discovered. She thanked the workers who had maintained power and communication systems through the crisis, ensuring people could connect in their final hours. Mass gatherings formed at significant locations worldwide. Times Square overflowed with people watching the countdown on giant screens. The Great Wall of China became a pilgrimage route as millions walked its length. Stonehenge hosted drummers and dancers, celebrating humanity's first and last connection to cosmic cycles. Violence erupted in some regions as old hatreds demanded final expression. Border conflicts that had simmered for decades exploded into brief, pointless wars. But these were exceptions. Most of humanity faced extinction with unexpected grace, finding peace in shared fate, if not shared belief. The internet struggled under unprecedented load as everyone attempted final communications. Servers overheated, networks crashed, but engineers worked frantically to maintain connections. The digital realm had become humanity's confessional, its gallery, its desperate attempt to leave something, anything, that might outlast the void. Families gathered from across continents, using precious fuel for final reunions. Airports operated on volunteer basis as pilots flew anyone anywhere, no tickets required. The last commercial flight landed at JFK just as the 12-hour mark passed, carrying refugees from nowhere to nowhere, movement for its own sake. As Earth rotated into its final night, 8 billion humans faced annihilation with responses as varied as their cultures. Some prayed, some partied, some simply sat quietly with those they loved. The countdown continued its relentless progression, marking humanity's final hours in the universe it had barely begun to understand. In facilities across Earth, scientists pursued desperate final experiments. At CERN, the Large Hadron Collider ran at energies that should have destroyed it, searching for particles that might resist vacuum decay. At Fermilab, researchers attempted to create microscopic wormholes, hoping to transport information, if not matter beyond the void bubble's reach. The Seed Ship program achieved impossible momentum in 48 hours. SpaceX, Blue Origin, NASA, Roscosmos, and the Chinese Space Agency pooled resources for humanity's most ambitious project. 37 rockets stood ready on launch pads worldwide, each carrying a capsule with frozen embryos, genetic samples, and cultural archives. These ships couldn't outrun vacuum decay, but they might serve as messages in bottles, preserving human essence until found by civilizations in distant galaxies, untouched by the expanding void. The capsules were built to survive billions of years, powered by radioisotope decay, broadcasting their presence on frequencies aliens might monitor. Each capsule contained the global genome archive, DNA from every species on Earth encoded in crystalline matrices. The Library of Congress, Wikipedia, and Internet Archive were compressed onto quantum storage devices. Children's artwork, symphonies, and mathematical proofs were etched into gold plates that would outlast the stars. The launch sequence began 18 hours before void bomb activation. Rockets lifted off in carefully orchestrated waves, their trajectories calculated to achieve maximum dispersal across the galaxy. Some aimed for nearby star systems, others toward galactic center, still others perpendicular to the galactic plane into intergalactic void. The most ambitious rocket targeted Andromeda, carrying a capsule that would arrive in 2 million years. Its message was simple. Earth existed. We were here. We mattered. The capsule included instructions for reconstructing human DNA, though whether any intelligence would attempt such resurrection remained unknowable. Project Lighthouse attempted to encode human consciousness into electromagnetic radiation. Volunteers underwent brain scans while powerful transmitters broadcast the data toward distant galaxies. The science was questionable, the philosophy dubious, but it represented humanity's refusal to disappear without trace. At MIT, researchers completed work on the black box, a quantum computer designed to simulate human consciousness. 10,000 volunteers had their neural patterns uploaded in the final hours. The computer would be launched on the last rocket 12 minutes before detonation. If consciousness was merely information, perhaps these digital ghosts might persist. The Message Composition Committee, formed from linguists, mathematicians, and artists, crafted humanity's final statement to the universe. It began with prime numbers and basic mathematics, progressed through physics and chemistry, then bloomed into music, poetry, and images of Earth's biosphere. The message concluded with a simple plea: remember us. Underground vaults sealed their doors on collections deemed too precious to risk in space. the Svalbard Global Seed Vault received final deposits from botanists worldwide. Time capsules were buried at depths that wouldn't matter when space-time itself transformed. These gestures were futile, but psychologically necessary. Amateur radio operators coordinated the largest simultaneous transmission in history. At precisely noon GMT, every transmitter on Earth broadcast the same message, a recording of a child laughing, followed by silence. The signal would propagate outward at light speed, reaching Alpha Centauri in 4 years, carrying proof that joy had once existed here. The final Hubble Space Telescope images were transmitted to the seed ships, pictures of distant galaxies, stellar nurseries, and planets orbiting other stars. Humanity's last gift to itself was perspective, a reminder that the universe would continue its vast processes regardless of Earth's fate. Religious leaders coordinated a moment of global prayer 5 hours before detonation. Every faith tradition participated, from Catholics to Buddhists, Muslims to indigenous shamans. For 3 minutes, Earth fell silent as billions contemplated whatever gave them comfort. The planet itself seemed to hold its breath. These efforts would fail to save humanity. The physics were immutable, but they succeeded in their deeper purpose, proving that even facing absolute annihilation, humans would still create, still hope, still reach toward tomorrow, even when tomorrow couldn't exist. 4 billion years of evolution would end in 0.04 seconds. The number was too small for human comprehension, yet it contained the termination of every biological process that had ever existed on Earth. From the first self-replicating molecules in primordial soup to the complexity of human consciousness, all would cease simultaneously. The Amazon rainforest, producing 20% of Earth's oxygen, harboring millions of species still undiscovered by science. Every tree, insect, and microorganism would transition from biology to undefined physics in the time it took light to travel 12,000 kilometers. The medicine plants that might have cured cancer, the insects that could have inspired new technologies, all lost. The Great Barrier Reef, already dying from climate change, would never complete its decline. Coral polyps that had survived for centuries, building structures visible from space, would cease to exist at the quantum level. The clownfish hiding in anemones, the sharks patrolling deeper waters, the microscopic zooplankton forming the ocean's foundation, all would vanish together. Every language would die simultaneously. Mandarin spoken by billions, English serving as humanity's common tongue, and thousands of indigenous languages preserved by single communities. The last speakers of dying languages had spent recent years creating recordings, desperate to preserve what colonization and globalization couldn't destroy, unaware that physics would accomplish what politics couldn't. Art would cease to exist. The Mona Lisa, protected in the Louvre's climate-controlled chamber. Starry Night, expressing Van Gogh's tortured genius. Cave paintings in Lascaux, humanity's first attempt to capture meaning. Digital art existing only as electromagnetic patterns on servers. All would transition from human expression to quantum foam. Music would fall silent. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, humanity's anthem of joy. Traditional songs pass through generations without written notation. The latest pop songs streaming to billions of devices. Every frequency, rhythm, and harmony that had ever moved human hearts would become meaningless when the physics supporting sound waves transformed. The libraries would burn without flame. Every book, scroll, and tablet that preserved human knowledge. The Library of Alexandria's surviving fragments. The Vatican's secret archives. The Internet Archive's desperate attempt to digitize everything. Words would lose meaning when the atoms forming their medium could no longer exist. Love stories would end mid-sentence. Couples who had been together decades and those who had just met. Parents' love for children. Friendships that had survived distance and time. The complex web of human connection that defined our species. The chemical processes in brains that created these emotions would cease when chemistry itself became impossible. Scientific discoveries would be unmade. The structure of DNA, the theory of evolution, quantum mechanics, our understanding of the cosmos, knowledge that took millennia to accumulate, would vanish faster than neurons could fire. The questions we never answered would remain forever mysteries. What is consciousness? Are we alone? What is dark matter? Every pet would disappear with their owners. Dogs who had waited faithfully for returns that would never come. Cats who had provided comfort through crisis. The horses, birds, fish, and reptiles that humans had brought into their homes. The bond between species that had defined domestication would end without goodbye. Earth's geology would unrecord its history, the Grand Canyon's layers revealing 2 billion years of change. Himalayan peaks pushed skyward by tectonic collision, volcanic islands emerging from ocean depths. The planet's autobiography written in stone would become unreadable when stone itself transformed. Human struggles would be rendered meaningless. Every war fought for territory that would cease to exist. Every border drawn and defended. Every revolution, election, and succession. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the Korean division, territorial disputes in the South China Sea, all would achieve resolution through mutual annihilation. Children's dreams would never be realized. The girl who wanted to be an astronaut. The boy who planned to cure disease. The teenager writing their first novel. The infant who would never speak their first word. Potential would collapse into void along with everything else. Earth's story would end mid-chapter, every narrative incomplete, every possibility unrealized. We would become a cautionary tale in alien archives, a civilization that burned bright and brief before physics itself turned against us. The moment of transition would occur at scales smaller than human perception could grasp. In the first yoctosecond, 10 to the minus 24th seconds after initiation, quantum fields within the 1-meter sphere would shift to their true vacuum state. The Higgs field would drop to a lower energy configuration, fundamentally altering how particles acquire mass. Within this sphere, quarks would no longer bind together to form protons and neutrons. The strong nuclear force, operating under transformed physics, couldn't maintain atomic nuclei. Matter wouldn't explode or decay in any conventional sense. It would simply cease to be matter as our universe defines it. The boundary between false and true vacuum would propagate outward as a phase transition, similar to how ice transforms to water, but occurring at the fundamental level of reality itself. The energy density at this boundary would exceed anything since the Big Bang. Not thermal energy or radiation, but the raw difference between two states of existence. Electrons would lose their defined orbital structures as the electromagnetic force altered its properties. Chemistry would become impossible. Molecules would unravel, not through breaking chemical bonds, but through the cessation of the physics that allowed bonds to exist. Water wouldn't boil or freeze. It would stop being water at the level of its constituent particles. The speed of propagation, 299,792 kilometers per second, was limited only by causality itself. Information about the vacuum state change couldn't travel faster than light, making the bubble's expansion a spherical wave of transformation, racing outward at the universe's maximum speed. Inside the bubble, new physics would reign. The fundamental constants that had remained stable for 13.8 billion years would shift to new values. The fine structure constant determining electromagnetic interaction strength. The gravitational constant defining space-time curvature. The cosmological constant governing universal expansion. All would assume new values incompatible with structures that evolved under old physics. Matter caught in the transition wouldn't experience the change. Neurons couldn't fire signals about destruction that occurred faster than neural transmission. Consciousness would end between one thought and the next, or more accurately, mid-thought, as the physical substrate of awareness transformed. The Earth's iron core would offer no more resistance than its atmosphere. Density was irrelevant when the fundamental forces binding matter changed. The planet would be consumed layer by layer at light speed. Crust, mantle, outer core, inner core, all transitioning to undefined states in perfect sequence. Gravitational effects would be bizarre. Earth's mass wouldn't disappear, but would be redistributed under new physics. The Moon's orbit would be disrupted not by losing Earth's gravity, but by that gravity operating under transformed laws. Tidal locking would break, orbits would shift, the elegant dance of celestial mechanics would stumble. The electromagnetic radiation Earth had been broadcasting for a century would continue outward, unaffected beyond the bubble. Radio signals, television broadcasts, and radar pulses would carry evidence of our existence to distant stars long after their source had transformed. We would become ghosts made of light, haunting the galaxy with transmissions from a world that no longer existed. Heat death, the universe's projected end in trillions of years, would be accelerated within the bubble. The new vacuum state would have different thermodynamic properties, potentially reaching maximum entropy faster than regions of false vacuum. The bubble would be a preview of the universe's ultimate fate. Quantum mechanics might operate differently within the true vacuum. Superposition, entanglement, and uncertainty might follow new rules or cease entirely. The quantum computers humanity had been developing would face not just destruction, but the invalidation of their operating principles. Black holes near the boundary would interact unpredictably with the phase transition. Their event horizons, defined by space-time geometry, would encounter space-time operating under different physics. The result could be explosive release of contained mass energy or complete absorption into the new vacuum state. The observers in Rodriguez's underground chamber, if it somehow succeeded, would witness physics itself changing around them. They would exist as an island of familiar reality in an ocean of transformed space-time, unable to interact with the new physics beyond their protective bubble. Their survival would be a prison of preserved normalcy. The 12-hour mark triggered humanity's final organizational efforts. Governments ceased functioning as structures but continued as individual actions. The president made personal phone calls to other world leaders, not about policy, but about fear, regret, and the strange peace that came with shared doom. Emergency broadcast systems delivered their last updates. Seek comfort with loved ones. There is no shame in fear. There is no wrong way to face this. You are not alone. The messages repeated in every language, read by broadcasters who had volunteered to stay at their posts until the end. Transportation systems operated on pure volunteerism. Pilots flew planes without air traffic control. Train engineers ran routes they had memorized over careers. Bus drivers picked up anyone who waved, destinations irrelevant when every road led to the same ending. Movement became its own purpose, a defiance of approaching stillness. Children's television networks maintained regular programming. Cartoon characters continued their animated adventures. Educational shows taught letters and numbers to toddlers who would never use them. The decision to maintain normalcy for the youngest was perhaps humanity's most compassionate lie. Prisons opened their doors worldwide. Maximum security facilities released serial killers alongside petty thieves. Some inmates chose to remain in familiar cells. Others sought families they hadn't seen in decades. Justice became meaningless when the universe itself would serve as judge, jury, and executioner. The internet backbone showed signs of imminent collapse. Server farms overheated from unprecedented traffic. Undersea cables carried data loads beyond their design limits. System administrators performed digital triage, prioritizing personal communications over commercial traffic. Amazon and Google became conduits for final goodbyes rather than corporate entities. Hospitals distributed their pharmaceutical supplies to anyone requesting them. Morphine for those choosing unconscious ends. Stimulants for those wanting to remain alert until the last moment. Psychedelics for those seeking altered perspectives on annihilation. Medical ethics had simplified to a single principle: reduce suffering however possible. The seed ships continued launching every 17 minutes. Each launch was broadcast globally. Humanity watching its genetic legacy escape Earth's gravity well. Children had named each vessel Hope, Memory, Defiance, Tomorrow. The names were painted hastily on rocket sides, visible as they rose on pillars of flame toward futures they would never reach. Artists worked frantically on final pieces. Musicians recorded last songs. Writers typed stories they would never edit. The creative impulse persisted despite its futility, perhaps because of it. Making something from nothing before everything became nothing. Religious conversions spiked alongside apostasy. Churches gained and lost congregants in equal measure. Some found faith facing annihilation, others abandoned it. Pascal's wager became irrelevant when the house itself would cease to exist. Believers and atheists would face the same undefined transformation. Scientists maintained observation posts, determined to record data until the final moment. Radio telescopes tracked the void bomb. Seismic monitors detected panic's footsteps in fleeing crowds. Weather satellites photographed Earth's last sunset. Knowledge would die with those who sought it, but the seeking continued. Wildlife exhibited strange behaviors as human activity ceased. Wolves entered Moscow's streets. Deer grazed in Times Square. Birds sang at unusual hours, perhaps detecting electromagnetic changes from the void bomb's charging sequence. Nature was reclaiming civilization's spaces hours before both would vanish. Schools held graduation ceremonies for every grade. Kindergartners wore paper caps. High school seniors gave speeches about futures that wouldn't exist. Teachers presented diplomas that meant nothing, except that someone had cared enough to pretend normalcy in abnormal times. The lottery drew its final numbers. Game shows crowned their last champions. Stock markets automatically updated prices for companies that would never open again. Human systems continued their mechanical routines, unable to comprehend their own approaching irrelevance. As the countdown entered single digits, a strange calm settled over much of Earth. The panic had exhausted itself. The anger had no target. All that remained was waiting, and the peculiar intimacy of sharing extinction with every living thing that had ever called Earth home. The erosion protocol observed Earth's final hours with the detached precision of entities that had witnessed 17,000 similar endings. To them, human responses followed predictable patterns, variations on themes they had catalogued across millennia of necessary extinctions. The bargaining phase had passed quickly, lasting only 18 hours before humans accepted their fate's inevitability. This was faster than average. Most species continued negotiation attempts until the final moments. Humanity's rapid progression to acceptance suggested either wisdom or exhaustion. They noted the seed ship launches with something approximating approval. Every terminated civilization attempted to preserve something of themselves. The Kythera had encoded their consciousness in crystallized methane. The ordained had transmitted their hive mind's patterns toward distant galaxies. Earth's combination of biological samples and cultural archives was pragmatic, though ultimately futile. The underground bunker experiment drew particular attention. Humans were attempting to preserve a pocket of false vacuum, something only 3 previous civilizations had tried. The protocol calculated a 0.003% chance of success, but even failure would provide valuable data about vacuum boundary dynamics. They would observe carefully, though intervention remained impossible once the process began. Human emotional responses registered as typical for a young species. The denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance occurred in expected proportions. The speed of emotional processing correlated with neural complexity and social communication systems. Humans fell within normal parameters for carbon-based consciousness. The religious responses were noted and archived. 87% of terminated species exhibited increased spiritual activity when facing extinction. The search for meaning beyond physical existence appeared to be a universal trait among conscious beings. The protocol had long ago concluded that consciousness itself was the universe attempting to understand its own nature. They observed the violence with clinical interest. Only 3.7% of humans engaged in destructive behavior during the final hours, well below the galactic average of 11.2%. This suggested stronger social cohesion than initial assessments had indicated. Perhaps humans might have developed into a stable galactic civilization given more time. The creative output in humanity's final hours exceeded predictions. New art, music, literature, and scientific theories emerged at rates surpassing any previous period in human history. Proximity to termination appeared to catalyze creative expression. This data would be valuable for understanding consciousness's relationship with mortality awareness. Earth's children received special attention in the protocol's observations. Young consciousness facing termination before full development represented the highest ethical cost of their actions. But allowing those consciousnesses to mature into species that could destroy galaxies would be far worse. Mathematics demanded choosing the lesser tragedy. The protocol recorded every human's final moments, creating quantum resolution archives of Earth's last day. 8 billion individual stories of how consciousness faced its ending. This data would be studied for millions of years, helping refine termination procedures to minimize suffering in future extinctions. They understood what humans couldn't. Earth was not special. Every species believed itself unique, its consciousness unprecedented, its potential unlimited. But patterns repeated across the galaxy. The same curiosity that drove evolution toward intelligence also drove intelligence toward dangerous knowledge. The protocol existed to break this cycle. The love humans displayed for each other registered as statistically significant. The proportion choosing to die together rather than alone exceeded galactic norms by 34%. This suggested humans had developed unusual capacity for emotional bonding, possibly explaining their rapid technological advancement through cooperation. As the final hour approached, the protocol prepared to archive Earth's electromagnetic emissions. Every radio and television broadcast would be preserved, creating a complete record of humanity's brief experiment with technology. Future civilizations would study these transmissions, learning what not to become. The protocol felt what could only be described as professional satisfaction. The termination would be clean, comprehensive, and complete. No suffering, no survivors to carry trauma, no incomplete erasure that might require follow-up action. By their standards, they were providing humanity with the best possible ending. In their vast consciousness, Earth would be remembered as Case 17,439. A promising species that developed too quickly, achieved dangerous knowledge before wisdom, and was terminated according to established protocols. Humanity would join the archive of cautionary tales, forever preserved, but never again alive. The luxury yacht Eclipse departed Monaco 47 hours before detonation, carrying 30 billionaires who believed money could purchase survival. Their plan was simple: reach international waters, transfer to a submarine, and descend to maximum depth when the void bubble arrived. They had calculated that being underwater might somehow shield them from the physics transformation. The submarine descended to 3,800 meters, its hull creaking under pressure that would soon become irrelevant. The billionaires sat in leather chairs, sipping champagne that cost more than most humans earned in lifetimes. They would have 0.013 seconds longer than surface dwellers, the time it took light to travel through water to their depth. Their wealth had purchased 13 milliseconds. Flight 447 from Sydney to Los Angeles took off 3 hours before detonation, its passengers choosing to die in the sky rather than on ground. The pilots had calculated they would be over the Pacific when the bubble reached them, 11,000 meters above the ocean. They would see the horizon begin to change, reality itself unraveling from east to west before joining the transformation. The International Space Station's crew of 7 had voted to remain aboard rather than attempt re-entry. They would have 0.0014 seconds more than Earth's surface, the time light took to travel 420 kilometers to their orbit. Commander Sarah Williams had positioned the station's cameras to record Earth's final moment, though the recording would last nanoseconds before the equipment transformed. In Antarctica, the Vostok station team descended into the ancient ice core drilling site, reaching depths of 3,768 meters below the surface. They hypothesized that ice laid down millions of years ago might somehow resist the vacuum transition. The theory had no scientific basis, but it provided purpose in purposeless hours. They would gain 0.000012 seconds. 3 nuclear submarines attempted to outrun the expansion by traveling at maximum speed away from the void bomb's position. The USS Virginia achieved 65 kilometers per hour, crossing 800 kilometers in the final 12 hours. Their efforts would grant them 0.0027 seconds of additional existence. The crew spent those hours playing cards and sharing stories, knowing their flight was futile, but needing to try. In orbit, the secret military spaceplane X-37C attempted an emergency burn toward Mars. Its experimental engine could achieve velocities no public spacecraft could match. But even at its maximum acceleration, it would be only 50,000 kilometers from Earth when the bubble arrived. The 2 astronauts aboard would live 17/100ths of a second longer than those they left behind. The cave diving expedition in Mexico's Sistema Oxbelhar descended to 119 meters below sea level, then traveled 17 kilometers through flooded passages. They theorized that being underground and underwater might provide double protection. Their dive computers would register the approaching phase transition 0.00006 seconds before they ceased to exist. Elon Musk's personal evacuation rocket launched 6 hours before detonation, carrying him and 5 engineers toward Mars. They had no supplies for the journey, no plan for arrival. The rocket would travel 19,000 kilometers before the expanding bubble caught them. They would live 0.063 seconds longer than Earth, time enough for neurons to begin but not complete a single thought. The mining crew at South Africa's Mponeng gold mine, 4 kilometers below ground, had sealed themselves in the deepest accessible chamber. They sat in absolute darkness, conserving headlamp batteries for the final moments. The phase transition would reach them 0.000013 seconds after the surface, their depth buying them less time than a synapse takes to fire. Amateur pilots worldwide took to the skies in the final hours, choosing to meet annihilation airborne. Small planes, helicopters, hang gliders, and hot air balloons filled Earth's atmosphere. They would gain no additional time, but the psychological comfort of flight, of not being trapped on ground when reality collapsed, was worth the fuel they burned. Each escape attempt was an exercise in human defiance against inevitable mathematics. Distance was meaningless when measured against light speed, depth irrelevant when transformation occurred at quantum scales, wealth and technology pointless against the fundamental forces of physics. Yet humans tried, because trying was what made them human, even when trying meant nothing. 60 minutes remained. The countdown timers displayed on every screen had simplified to showing only minutes and seconds. The precision of smaller units had become psychologically unbearable. Watching nanoseconds disappear made time itself feel like an enemy. The void bomb began its final charging sequence. Energy readings detected by Earth's satellites showed exponential increases in exotic particle production. The alien vessels maintained their protective triangle, but their purpose was complete. They were now merely observers to inevitability. In New York, Central Park filled with people lying on grass, looking at stars they would never see again. Families spread blankets as if for picnics. Musicians played without amplification, their acoustic songs mixing into a chaotic, but somehow perfect symphony. The city that never slept, prepared for eternal sleep. Rodriguez sealed the underground chamber with 41 souls inside. 2 last-minute arrivals had been rejected. The calibrations couldn't be adjusted for additional mass. She initiated the negative energy field, Watching displays shows space-time itself becoming rigid around the sphere. She would maintain the field manually until the void bubble arrived, giving those inside their slim chance. The final presidential address lasted 90 seconds. My fellow humans, we face the end with the dignity our species has earned through 4 billion years of evolution. We loved. We learned. We reached for stars we will never touch. That was enough. That was everything. Children's choirs sang in cities worldwide, their voices broadcast and mixed into a global song. They didn't understand the words about endings and memory, but they understood being together, holding hands, making music while music could still exist. Their innocence made the approaching annihilation obscene. The last commercial transaction occurred at a McDonald's in Tokyo. A child bought an ice cream cone with coins from her piggy bank. The teenage cashier made change from habit, both participating in the ritual of normalcy. The ice cream would melt in 11 minutes, but never reach the ground. Hospitals administered final sedatives to those who chose unconsciousness. Delivery rooms continued their work, bringing new lives into a world with minutes remaining. The contradiction of birth and approaching universal death created a cognitive dissonance that broke several nurses, who collapsed weeping while newborns cried their first and last cries. The Hubble Space Telescope transmitted its final image, the void bomb itself, now glowing with energies that shouldn't exist in our physics. The image was automatically archived to servers that would survive 8 seconds longer than the telescope, preserving humanity's last observation of its destroyer. Air traffic control globally reported empty skies for the first time since 1903. Every aircraft had landed or crashed. The age of human flight had ended where it began, on the ground. The Wright brothers' monument at Kitty Hawk stood abandoned, its inscription about conquering air soon to be conquered by void. Power grids began failing in cascade as operators abandoned stations. Cities went dark in waves, but it didn't matter. People gathered around fires, candles, phone screens providing final illumination. The electric age was ending by returning to humanity's first technology, flame. The internet's final message was posted on Reddit. See you on the other side. It received 12 million upvotes in 40 seconds before the servers hosting it failed. Humanity's last collective agreement was hope for continuity that physics wouldn't permit. Marine biologists reported that dolphins and whales were beaching themselves globally, as if they somehow sensed the approaching change. Dogs howled in synchronization. Birds fell silent. The animal kingdom's instincts detected something their consciousness couldn't understand. Radio telescopes detected the void bomb's final energy surge. The transformation would begin in exactly 60 seconds. Humanity's last minute had begun. Everything that had ever been accomplished, everyone who had ever lived, every dream and fear and love, had 1 minute remaining in a universe that would soon forget they had ever existed. At 15:47:33 Universal Time, the void bomb triggered. The initial sphere of true vacuum formed exactly 1 meter in diameter, centered on the device's exotic matter core. For the first nanosecond, the transformation was contained, existing as a perfect bubble of alien physics surrounded by our familiar false vacuum. Then the boundary began its inexorable expansion at 299,792,458 meters per second. Earth-facing satellites captured the first visible evidence, a perfect sphere of nothingness expanding from L1 Lagrange point. Not darkness, not light, but something human vision couldn't process. The absence of physics as we understood it. Cameras registered the phenomenon as null data. Sensors simply stopped reporting from regions the bubble had consumed. The moon bases had positioned every telescope toward Earth, their crews choosing to witness humanity's end. They saw the planet begin to disappear from the point nearest the void bomb. Not an explosion, not a collapse, but a clean erasure, as if reality itself was being deleted. The Earth's edge became undefined, matter transitioning to something that couldn't reflect light. In 0.04 seconds, Earth was gone, The transformation moved through the planet faster than seismic waves, faster than sound, faster than any information could propagate through matter. The bubble entered Earth's atmosphere and reached the core before the surface had time to respond. No one felt anything. Consciousness ended between one neural firing and the next, too quickly for fear or pain or final thoughts. Cities vanished in sequence based on their geometric position, relative to the expanding sphere. Beijing ceased to exist 0.00003 seconds before London. New York followed 0.00001 seconds later. The differences were meaningless to human perception, but precisely recorded by the alien observers who documented every detail. The underground chamber's negative energy field held for 18 nanoseconds before failing catastrophically. Rodriguez had enough time for electrons in her visual cortex to begin responding to photons showing the field collapse. She never completed seeing her failure. The 41 people inside experienced 3 nanoseconds of normal physics before joining the transformation. The ocean disappeared in layers, its depth irrelevant to light speed progression. Whales in the Mariana Trench gained no more time than surface plankton. The water didn't boil or freeze. It ceased being water when the hydrogen-oxygen bonds became impossible under true vacuum physics. Earth's iron core offered no more resistance than its atmosphere. Density meant nothing when the fundamental forces holding atoms together changed. The planet's magnetic field collapsed instantly, though there was nothing left to be affected by its absence. 4.5 billion years of geological history, unmade in less time than a heartbeat. The Moon followed 1.3 seconds after Earth. The Apollo landing sites, humanity's first steps beyond Earth, were erased along with the footprints that would have lasted millions of years. The American flags, bleached white by decades of radiation, transformed into undefined states along with the moon dust around them. The expanding sphere was visible from Mars as a growing circle of wrongness against the stars. The rovers and orbiters humanity had sent to the red planet continued their observations until the bubble reached them. Curiosity's last transmission showed Martian soil samples it would never analyze. Perseverance's final image was of tire tracks it had just created, marking paths that would exist for 4 more minutes. The transformation wasn't violent by conventional standards. No heat, no radiation, no shock waves. Just a redefinition of what matter and energy meant. Inside the bubble, new physics reigned. Particles that had been protons became something else. Forces that had been electromagnetic became undefined. Space and time themselves operated under rules incompatible with our universe. The International Space Station lasted 0.0014 seconds longer than Earth's surface. Its cameras captured 421 frames of the planet, disappearing before they too transformed. The final frame showed Earth half consumed, looking like a sphere of reality with a bite taken out by nothingness. The debris field of human satellites transformed in order of their orbits. GPS satellites, communication relays, weather monitors, spy satellites, all the infrastructure of human civilization converted to undefined physics in precise sequence. The last human-made object to transform was Voyager 1, though it wouldn't happen for hours. The boundary between false and true vacuum was absolute. No intermediate state, no gradual transition. One side contained the physics that had governed reality for 13.8 billion years. The other contained something so alien that calling it physics was merely a linguistic convenience. Earth had existed for 4.5 billion years. It ceased to exist in 0.04 seconds. Where a blue marble had orbited a yellow star, now only transformed space-time expanded outward, carrying its alien physics toward everything humanity had ever known or observed. Mars fell at 16:04:27 Universal Time, 17 minutes after Earth. The red planet's thin atmosphere offered no herald of approaching doom. The transformation simply arrived, converting rusty iron oxide deserts into undefined physics at light speed. Olympus Mons, the the solar system's tallest volcano, ceased to exist from base to peak in 0.0089 seconds. The Mars colonies had 17 minutes to contemplate Earth's absence. They watched the void bubble expand through their telescopes, a perfect sphere of nothingness growing against the stars. Some colonists sent final messages toward Earth, not knowing if anyone remained to receive them. Others simply held each other, waiting for physics itself to turn against them. The asteroid belt mining stations received 23 to 41 minutes of warning, depending on their positions. The crew of the Ceres refinery used their time to launch message capsules toward the outer planets, hoping someone further out might survive longer. They encoded everything they had witnessed, turning themselves into humanity's final documentarians. Europa Station, orbiting Jupiter's ice moon, detected the approaching bubble 52 minutes after Earth's termination. The research team, studying potential life in Europa's subsurface ocean, made a final decision. They triggered the ice penetrator probe, sending it toward the ocean below. If microbial life existed there, it would outlive humanity by minutes. The probe would never reach the ocean. Jupiter itself presented a unique spectacle as the void bubble arrived. The gas giant's immense gravity briefly distorted the bubble's perfect spherical expansion, though only by nanoseconds. The Great Red Spot, a storm larger than Earth that had raged for centuries, vanished mid-rotation. The planet's dozens of moons transformed in sequence based on their orbital positions. Saturn's rings disappeared like a cosmic magic trick. The billions of ice particles that created the solar system's most beautiful structure converted to undefined states in waves. The transformation moved through the ring system at light speed, creating the brief illusion of the rings being erased by an invisible eraser. The heliopause, where solar wind met interstellar space, provided no barrier to the expanding bubble. The Voyager probes, humanity's most distant ambassadors, detected no change in their instruments before being consumed. Their golden records, carrying sounds and images of Earth, transformed along with their messages of peace in 55 human languages. The Oort cloud, that vast sphere of comets marking our solar system's edge, would take years for the bubble to fully consume. Each icy body would transform in isolation, too far from any other object to share the moment. The comets that might have one day visited Earth's skies would instead join Earth in undefined physics. 5 hours and 27 minutes after detonation, the bubble reached the Kuiper Belt. Pluto, which humans had argued about classifying as a planet, ceased to exist regardless of its designation. Its moon Charon followed seconds later, their eternal dance around a shared gravitational center ending mid-orbit. The New Horizons spacecraft, which had photographed Pluto in 2015, was traveling toward interstellar space when the bubble caught it. Its final signals toward Earth encountered only transformed space-time where Earth had been. The photographs of Pluto it carried became meaningless when both photographer and subject no longer existed. Solar observatories throughout the system recorded the Sun's response to losing its planets. The gravitational perturbations as each world vanished were minimal but measurable. The Sun would continue fusion for billions of years, but it would be warming nothing, illuminating only the expanding sphere of true vacuum that had replaced its family of worlds. By solar sunset, on what would have been Earth's final day, the entire inner solar system had been transformed. Where planets had orbited for billions of years, only alien physics expanded outward. The precise clockwork of gravitational mechanics that had governed planetary motion since the solar system's formation had been replaced by something undefined and unknowable. The asteroid belt took 18 hours to fully transform. Each tumbling rock, each fragment of the planet that never formed, joined the expanding sphere of true vacuum. The miners who had fled inward hoping for more time had gained only minutes. Their final messages toward the outer planets were swallowed by the same transformation they described. The void bubble would reach Proxima Centauri, our nearest stellar neighbor, in 4.3 years. The red dwarf star and its potentially habitable planet Proxima b would transform without warning. Any life that might have evolved there would end as abruptly as Earth's, consumed by physics they couldn't comprehend. Alpha Centauri A and B, the binary pair orbiting each other in cosmic partnership, would be separated by the bubble. A would transform first, leaving B to orbit nothing for the brief time before it too joined the transformation. Their gravitational dance, performed for billions of years, would end mid-step. Barnard's star, 6 light-years distant, would have 6 years to observe the approaching void if it possessed observers. The bubble would appear first as a growing blindness in the sky, stars disappearing not behind darkness, but into nothingness. By the time the transformation arrived, a significant portion of the visible universe would have vanished. The expansion would continue at light speed forever unless it encountered another region of true vacuum, or the universe's expansion carried space away faster than light could traverse it. The bubble would consume the local group in 2 million years, the Virgo cluster in 65 million years, and continue outward until heat death or collision with another vacuum domain. Calculations suggested the bubble might eventually slow due to quantum effects at its boundary, but this remained purely theoretical. The energy density difference between false and true vacuum would drive expansion until that difference no longer existed. The universe itself was now divided. Regions of familiar physics and an expanding sphere where matter as we knew it couldn't exist. Any civilizations within the bubble's path faced the same fate as Earth. No warning would outrun the light-speed expansion. No technology could shield against fundamental physics changing. The erosion protocol had triggered not just Earth's end, but a potentially infinite cascade of extinction. The galactic implications were staggering. Every star system within thousands of light years would eventually be consumed unless the bubble spontaneously stopped. The Orion Arm, our local spiral of the Milky Way, would be transformed over the next 100,000 years. The galaxy itself would be bisected by a sphere of alien physics. Electromagnetic signals would continue to propagate normally until they encountered the boundary. Radio waves from Earth's century of broadcasting would travel outward, suddenly terminating when they met the expanding bubble. Future civilizations might detect these signals, cutting off abruptly, the only evidence that intelligent life had existed before the transformation. The bubble's interior remained a mystery even to the erosion protocol. Their models suggested new forms of existence might be possible under true vacuum physics, but these would be as alien to current life as our universe would be to two-dimensional beings. The transformation wasn't necessarily ending existence, just existence as any current intelligence could comprehend. Gravitational effects would propagate at light speed, synchronized with the bubble's expansion. Star systems would lose gravitational connection to transformed regions exactly when the visual evidence of transformation arrived. The universe would be editing itself in real time, removing celestial bodies from both sight and gravitational influence simultaneously. The cosmic web of dark matter would be affected in ways physicists couldn't predict. If dark matter operated under different principles than baryonic matter, it might resist or redirect the transformation, or it might accelerate it, creating channels of faster expansion along dark matter filaments. Black holes near the boundary would create unique interactions. Their event horizons, regions where space-time curved so extremely that light couldn't escape, would meet space-time operating under fundamentally different rules. The result could be explosive release of contained mass energy or complete absorption of the black hole into true vacuum physics. The bubble represented the universe's most efficient eraser, removing not just matter, but the possibility of matter as we understood it. Every atom that had formed in stellar cores, every molecule that had combined in cosmic chemistry, every structure from galaxies to DNA would be unmade and remade under rules that current physics couldn't describe. The erosion protocol's archives occupied structures that existed partially outside normal spacetime, immune to vacuum decay through technologies that manipulated dimensional boundaries. In these vast databases, Earth's complete history was being compiled and catalogued as entry 17,439 in the Registry of Terminated Civilizations. Every human who had ever lived was documented. 8 billion final biographical entries joined the historical records of the previous 108 billion humans who had existed since Homo sapiens emerged. Names, faces, DNA sequences, life events, all preserved in quantum crystalline matrices that would outlast the stars. Death had become data. The cultural archive was comprehensive beyond human comprehension. Every book, every song, every piece of art humanity had created was preserved. The Library of Congress, the Internet Archive, personal hard drives, handwritten journals, cave paintings, all had been scanned and stored during Earth's final hours. Humanity's creative output would be studied by civilizations that wouldn't evolve for billions of years. Earth's biological diversity was documented in molecular detail. DNA from every species, the proteins they produced, the ecosystems they formed. The Amazon rainforest existed now as information, its billions of organisms reduced to genetic sequences and behavioral algorithms. Life had become library. The technological progression was particularly noted. From stone tools to spacecraft in mere thousands of years represented one of the fastest development curves in galactic history. The protocol added Earth to the subset of civilizations that had achieved dangerous knowledge before wisdom, a category that included 23% of all terminated species. Human languages were preserved in their full complexity. Not just vocabulary and grammar, but the poetry they enabled, the concepts they uniquely expressed, the thoughts that could only be formed in specific linguistic frameworks. Mandarin's tonal subtleties, English's vast vocabulary, the clicking consonants of Khoisan languages, all archived forever. The protocol included psychological analyses of humanity's final hours, the ratio of cooperation to conflict, the prevalence of different coping mechanisms, the last words spoken by billions of individuals. These patterns would be compared to other terminated civilizations, adding data points to the vast study of how consciousness faced extinction. Scientific achievements were catalogued with particular attention. General relativity, quantum mechanics, the discovery of DNA, the standard model of particle physics. Earth's contributions to universal knowledge were modest but non-trivial. Some human insights had independently verified theories the protocol had known for eons. Others offered novel perspectives on familiar concepts. The failure modes that led to termination were documented in detail, the specific particle physics experiments that had triggered concern, the governance structures that prevented self-regulation, the psychological traits that drove dangerous curiosity. Future civilizations would study Earth's mistakes, hopefully avoiding similar fates. Personal messages to the future were preserved exactly as transmitted. Love letters to descendants who would never exist. Apologies for ending the world through scientific ambition. Philosophical reflections on meaning in a universe that permitted such absolute endings. The protocol preserved them all without judgment. Earth's electromagnetic emissions would be tracked as they propagated outward. Every television broadcast, radio transmission, and radar pulse would be recorded as they passed monitoring stations. I Love Lucy would continue traveling through space for decades before encountering the expanding void bubble. Earth's voice would outlive Earth itself. The visual record was extensive. Every photograph humanity had taken in its final years, every video recorded, every satellite image captured. Earth as seen from space, blue and white and beautiful, would be remembered in images, even though the reality had been transformed into something unrecognizable. The protocol noted Earth's seed ships with clinical interest. They calculated trajectories, evaluated survival probabilities, essentially zero, and added them to the database of escape attempts. Every terminated civilization tried to preserve something. None had succeeded in any meaningful way. Music received special archival attention. Something about human musical expression was unique in the protocol's experience. the mathematical ratios of harmony, the emotional responses to rhythm, the way humans had encoded meaning in organized sound. Earth's music would be studied as one of the civilization's most distinctive achievements. The archive would be available to future civilizations that reached appropriate technological levels without triggering termination. They would study Earth as historians, learning about a species that had shown promise but failed to survive its own curiosity. Humanity had become educational material for species that might succeed where we had failed. The theoretical foundation for vacuum decay emerged from quantum field theory in the 1970s. Physicists studying the Higgs field realized our universe might exist in a metastable state, like a ball perched on a mountain ledge, rather than in the valley below. If true, a sufficient perturbation could trigger a catastrophic transition to true vacuum. Current measurements of the Higgs boson mass and the top quark mass place our universe frustratingly close to the boundary between stable and metastable. At 125.1 gigaelectron volts, the Higgs mass suggests we might be living in a false vacuum. The uncertainty in these measurements leaves room for both comfort and cosmic anxiety. Natural vacuum decay probability is astronomically low. Calculations suggest waiting times of 10 to the power of 100 to 10 to the power of 500 years before spontaneous decay might occur. The universe is only 13.8 billion years old. If false vacuum were highly unstable, we wouldn't exist to worry about it. Our existence provides anthropic evidence for at least marginal stability. Particle accelerators have been proposed as potential triggers, but the energies involved are trivial compared to natural cosmic ray collisions. Every second, particles with energies far exceeding the Large Hadron Collider's capabilities strike Earth's atmosphere. If such energies could trigger vacuum decay, it would have happened billions of years ago. The theoretical possibility of artificial triggering remains contentious. Some physicists argue that creating the precise quantum conditions for vacuum decay would require manipulating the Higgs field directly at energy densities approaching the Planck scale. This is beyond any conceivable technology by factors of trillions. Black hole formation in particle accelerators was once feared as an existential risk. Similar concerns apply to vacuum decay. But every risk assessment has concluded that if such events were possible, natural processes would have already triggered them countless times throughout cosmic history. Cosmic rays provide a natural experiment in high-energy physics. Particles with energies of 10 to the 20 electron volts, called oh my god particles, regularly strike Earth. These collisions create conditions far more extreme than any human experiment. Yet vacuum decay hasn't occurred, suggesting significant barriers exist. The anthropic principle offers cold comfort. We can only observe universes stable enough to evolve observers. If vacuum decay were common, we wouldn't exist to discover it. Our existence proves nothing about future stability, only past survival. Quantum tunneling could theoretically trigger transition even at low energies. The probability is infinitesimal, but non-zero. This mechanism requires no exotic technology, just quantum mechanical chance. Every moment, there's an inconceivably small probability that vacuum decay could begin spontaneously anywhere in the universe. Some theories suggest vacuum decay has already occurred elsewhere in the universe. Vast voids between galaxy clusters might be regions of true vacuum expanding at light speed. We would receive no warning until the boundary arrived. This remains highly speculative and lacks observational support. Advanced civilizations might possess technologies we can't imagine, manipulating extra dimensions, creating regions of warped spacetime, or accessing energies near quantum gravity scales. If such capabilities exist, triggering vacuum decay might be possible. But this enters the realm of science fiction rather than physics. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests all possible outcomes occur in parallel universes. In branches where vacuum decay triggers, those universes are transformed. We necessarily exist in branches where it hasn't happened yet. This provides no protection, only philosophical perspective. String theory suggests our vacuum is one of 10 to the 500 possible states. Transitions between these states might be possible, but would require energies far beyond anything in the observable universe. The landscape of possible vacua remains theoretical, but it suggests our current state might be more stable than simple models suggest. Observations of distant supernovae confirm that physical constants haven't changed detectably over billions of years. If vacuum decay were occurring elsewhere in the universe, we might see variations in fundamental forces. The consistency argues for stability, though the void bubble would propagate at light speed, providing no advance warning. The bottom line, vacuum decay remains theoretically possible but practically implausible as a near-term threat. The universe has survived 13.8 billion years of natural experiments, far more extreme than anything humans could create. But the non-zero probability means that somewhere, somewhen, it might happen. We can only hope it's very far away and very far in the future. The void bomb scenario forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about humanity's cosmic significance. Are we alone in the universe? If not, how do advanced civilizations view younger species developing dangerous technologies? The Fermi Paradox gains new dimensions when we consider that the silence might be intentional, enforced by entities that eliminate threats before they mature. The Great Filter hypothesis suggests something prevents life from becoming spacefaring civilizations. Perhaps that filter isn't natural disaster or self-destruction, but deliberate culling by civilizations that survived their own dangerous phase and now prevent others from reaching similar capabilities. The universe might be quiet because someone is keeping it that way. Our electromagnetic emissions have been announcing our presence for over a century. Television broadcasts from the 1950s have now reached thousands of star systems. If anyone is listening, they know we're here, they know we're technological, and they can track our development through our own transmissions. SETI assumes benevolent or neutral responses to contact, but game theory suggests advanced civilizations might view emerging technologies as existential threats. The safest strategy might be preemptive elimination of species approaching dangerous knowledge. Dark forest theory posits that civilizations remain silent and destroy anyone who reveals themselves. Current particle physics experiments push boundaries we don't fully understand. The Large Hadron Collider achieves energies that existed microseconds after the Big Bang. Future accelerators will push further. We're conducting experiments whose full implications we can't predict, assuming the universe is resilient enough to tolerate our curiosity. The existential risk community has identified multiple threats: artificial intelligence, nuclear war, climate change, biotechnology. But physics experiments represent a unique category. We can't uninvent nuclear weapons, but we could choose not to probe certain energy regimes. The question is whether we have the wisdom to recognize boundaries before crossing them. International cooperation on existential risks remains fragmented. No global authority has the power to halt potentially dangerous research. The same nationalism and competition that drives technological progress prevents coordinated restraint. If alien civilizations exist, they might view our inability to self-regulate as justification for intervention. The simulation hypothesis gains unexpected relevance. If we exist in a simulation, triggering vacuum decay might simply end the program. The simulators might intervene before we damage their computational substrate. The void bomb scenario could be a test of our response to existential threats. Space colonization becomes more urgent when considering external threats. Distributing humanity across multiple worlds wouldn't save us from vacuum decay, but it might preserve us from other interventions. The longer we remain confined to Earth, the more vulnerable we are to any force that judges us dangerous. The message we send to the cosmos matters. Every transmission, from television broadcasts to deliberate SETI messages, shapes how hypothetical observers perceive us. Do we appear as curious explorers or reckless children playing with forces beyond our comprehension? The answer might determine our survival. Technological development trajectories suggest we're approaching several crucial thresholds simultaneously. Artificial general intelligence, fusion power, genetic engineering, and quantum computing will arrive within decades. Each increases our capability and our danger. We're becoming powerful enough to threaten ourselves and potentially others. The precautionary principle argues for restraint when consequences are uncertain but potentially catastrophic. Should we apply this to particle physics? Should there be energies we choose not to explore, experiments we decline to perform? The scientific community resists such limitations, viewing knowledge as inherently valuable. Education about existential risks remains limited. Most humans never contemplate species-level threats. The void bomb scenario, while fictional, illustrates how quickly everything could end. Understanding our fragility might inspire greater cooperation and wisdom in how we develop technology. The universe's apparent emptiness might be humanity's greatest fortune or our greatest warning. If we're alone, we bear sole responsibility for consciousness in the cosmos. If we're not alone, our continued existence might depend on demonstrating wisdom that we haven't yet achieved. The choice ahead is whether we mature quickly enough to survive our own capabilities. The void bomb scenario reminds us that the universe doesn't owe us existence. We persist through cosmic luck and whatever wisdom we can muster. The countdown isn't to alien intervention, but to our next dangerous discovery. The question is whether we'll be ready when we find it.